She was left alone with polar bears in the Arctic, and 2 years later, they returned. The cold wind of the Arctic was nothing compared to the storms Ada Blackjack had already weathered in her life. As an Inupiat woman, she had been poor, disenfranchised, and abused by her husband. She had lost 2 of her children, and her only surviving son was suffering from tuberculosis. Without money, alone and desperate, she had no choice but to place him in an orphanage, a decision that tore her heart apart. So when she was offered a place on an Arctic expedition for $50 a month, she saw it as her only chance, a last hope to save enough money to bring her son back and pay for his treatment. Wrangel Island, a remote, inhospitable land far north of the Siberian coast, became the stage for her destiny. Ada was not an adventurer, not a scientist. She was simply a mother. But the men on the expedition needed someone who could cook and speak a little English, and Ada met both criteria. Not knowing what lay ahead, she boarded the ship with trembling hands and a silent prayer in her heart. Aboard were 4 men, led by the ambition of explorer Vilhjálmur Stephenson, who sought to claim a piece of the Arctic for the British Empire. But for Ada, the goal was clear: survive, so she could one day hold her son again. The first weeks on the island felt almost peaceful. The men hunted, collected samples, laughed around the fire, and Ada cooked simple meals, each dish flavored with a hint of hope. Stephenson had promised that a supply ship would arrive in 6 months. They had enough food, the weather was manageable, and for a brief moment it seemed as if this harsh journey might actually save her. But as the sun sank below the frozen horizon, the true face of the North crept in, merciless, endless, deadly. With each passing day, hope grew quieter. The promised supply ship never arrived. The Arctic summer quickly gave way to a biting autumn, and hunting became increasingly difficult. The animals vanished, the ice returned, and with it came the endless night. For 61 days, the sun did not rise. The wind howled like a starving beast, rattling the windows. The men grew quieter, more irritable. The initial team spirit crumbled under the weight of disappointment and under the hunger. What had once been a shared adventure had now become a fight for bare survival. The supplies dwindled rapidly, and with them, their strength. Lorne Knight suffered the most. His gums bled, his joints ached, and his body deteriorated quickly. Scurvy. Ada cared for him, wiping his sweat, cooking broth from the last scraps, while outside the ice creaked ominously. In January 1923, on the edge of madness, Crawford, Galla, and Maurer made a desperate decision. They would try to cross the frozen sea to find help. With no guarantee of return, they said goodbye, with final letters, tears, and a look that said more than words. "If we don't make it, you must survive." The men disappeared into the vastness of the ice and never returned. Ada remained behind with the dying night and a spirit that grew stronger each day. Even as her body threatened to collapse, the darkness became her constant companion, the whistling wind her only voice to speak to. And yet, while others broke, Ada rose above it all. She, who had only come along as a simple cook, began to survive, for herself and for her son waiting far away in an orphanage, not knowing if his mother would ever return. On June 23, 1923, the last human voice on the island fell silent. Lorne Knight died in his sleep, emaciated, broken by disease and cold. Ada sat beside his lifeless body for a long time, too exhausted to cry, too hollow to scream. She couldn't bury him. The frozen ground was harder than stone, so she left him in his sleeping bag and built a wall of supply crates around him to protect him from wild animals. From that day forward, Ada Blackjack was alone. Truly, completely alone. No sound but the howling wind, no light but the pale shimmer of the Arctic sky. Only her and the endless, merciless wilderness. The Arctic had no pity. Polar bears prowled around the camp at night, their shadows enormous in the snowstorm. Ada, who had never before held a weapon, grasped the rifle. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from fear. But she learned to shoot, to hunt, to survive. Foxes, birds, even seals. Every animal she brought down meant another day she wouldn't starve. She built a wooden platform to observe the surroundings, set traps, and repaired her gear with bare hands. Every mistake could have meant death, but Ada became more skilled, more resilient, more determined with each day. During the long, lonely nights, she wrote in her diary, thoughts filled with fear, but also hope. "I must live for my son," she wrote again and again. The longing for her child became a flame inside her, keeping her alive even when her will threatened to break. Her clothes were torn, her body frail, but her spirit unbreakable. Ada Blackjack, once a quiet, overlooked woman, became a legend, not through violence or fame, but through sheer, unwavering will to survive. On August 19, 1923, as the icy wind swept across Wrangel Island, Ada heard a strange whistling sound, a tone she first mistook for a bird. But the next morning it returned, louder, deeper, a signal horn. It wasn't a bird, it was a ship. After 703 days in frozen isolation, 57 of them completely alone, Ada Blackjack was rescued by the Donaldson and Captain Gerald Noyes. When asked where the others were, she broke into tears and whispered, "There's no one else here. I'm all alone." The captain was deeply moved. "She's like Robinson Crusoe in real life," he later said, but Ada never wanted to be a hero. She just wanted to survive. For her son. Returning to civilization felt surreal. Reporters, scientists, even politicians wanted to speak with her, to praise her courage. But Ada stayed silent. Her thoughts were not on fame, but on the little boy still waiting in an orphanage. Stephenson, the man who sent her to the island, never paid her the full amount she was owed. But it was enough to bring her son back and take him to Seattle, where he finally received the medical care she had always dreamed of. And Ada? She was a mother again, no longer alone. Though her name appeared in the newspapers, she never truly returned to the spotlight. She remarried, lived modestly, and in 1937 moved back north. Ada Blackjack died at the age of 85, quietly as she had lived. But her legacy lives on, not as an explorer, not as a scientist, but as a woman who, in the darkest, coldest corner of the world, proved that courage, love, and hope are stronger than ice, hunger, and fear. The story of Ada Blackjack is more than just a tale of Arctic survival. It is a shining example of the quiet, unbreakable strength of a person who had lost everything, but never gave up. Ada wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. She was an ordinary woman with a single mission: to survive for her child. No training, no experience, no weapons, only courage, determination, and a heart stronger than the frozen death that surrounded her. What we can learn from Ada is that true strength is often silent. It doesn't scream, it doesn't boast, it acts. In a world that had forgotten her, Ada survived, because she never forgot herself. She showed us that even in the deepest darkness, hope can grow, and that love for another human being can be more powerful than any force of nature. Ada Blackjack has no monuments, but she left behind something far greater.